For our top story tonight, and it's a big one, India and the European Union have sealed a free trade agreement. The deal will give Indian exporters greater access to markets in 27 European countries. In return, India has drastically cut import duties on several items, including automobiles. Both New Delhi and Brussels are calling it the mother of all deals that will bring the Indian EU into one large trading bloc. But the devil at times can also lie in the details. How important is this deal for India as it attempts to look beyond the United States when it comes to trading blocs? It's our top story tonight.
A trade deal 20 years in the making is finally sealed. India and European Union on Tuesday concluded a free trade agreement with both sides hailed as the mother of all deals.
आज भारत ने अपने इतिहास का अब तक का सबसे बड़ा फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट संपन्न किया है। यह एक ऐतिहासिक समझौता हमारे किसानों, हमारे छोटे उद्योगों, इसके यूरोपियन मार्केट तक पहुंच आसान बनाएगा, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में नए अवसर पैदा करेगा और हमारे सर्विसेज सेक्टर के बीच सहयोग को और प्रबल करेगा।
Prime Minister, distinguished friend, we did it. We delivered the mother of all deals. We are creating a market of 2 billion people, and this is the tale of two giants, the world's second and fourth largest economies, two giants who choose partnership in a true win-win fashion.
Thank you, Madam.
While New Delhi has offered to cut duty on 96.6% of the export value of the EU, the European Union has committed to cut duty on 99% of Indian export value under the trade deal. Under the trade deal, India has agreed to cut duty to 0% on pharmaceuticals, iron and steel, chemicals, aircraft and plastics over the next few years. European-made cars will see tariffs plunge. Alcohol products will also be tariffed at a much lower rate. India, on the other hand, will get duty-free market access to products from sectors like textiles, footwear, base metals, marine products and chemicals. Both sides have agreed to keep each other's sensitive sectors out of the trade deal. These include India's agriculture, dairy and steel sector, and the EU's rice, sugar, beef and chicken. The deal comes at a time of disruption in the world order unleashed by US President Donald Trump.
आज ग्लोबल ऑर्डर में बड़ी उथल-पुथल है। ऐसे में भारत और यूरोपियन यूनियन की साझेदारी अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सिस्टम में स्थिरता को मजबूती देगी। इस संदर्भ में आज हमने यूक्रेन, पश्चिमी एशिया, इंडो पैसिफिक सहित कई वैश्विक मुद्दों पर विस्तार से चर्चा की। मल्टीलेटरलिज्म और इंटरनेशनल नॉर्म्स का सम्मान हमारी साझी प्राथमिकता है।
It will create levels of growth that neither side can achieve alone. And by combining these strengths, we reduce strategic dependencies at a time when trade is increasingly weaponized.
As part of India-EU mobility framework, Indian students, workers and professionals are set to get greater access to European countries. The trade deal, however, may take a few months to come into effect as it needs to be ratified by the European Parliament after legal vetting. With Ashwarya Paliwal and Chetan Bhutani, Bureau Report, India Today.
So let's raise the big question. Is this really the mother of all deals as the EU Leaders and India are describing it. Is that hype or substance? Can this deal now counter Trump's tariffs? Modi government's trade policy moving in the right direction? And will the EU end up benefiting more than India? Just some of the questions we'll raise. Velina Tchakarova is a geopolitical strategist. She's joining us from Vienna. Manjit Puri is former Indian ambassador to the EU. And Sabyasachi Saha is associate professor at Research and Information System for Developing Countries. I appreciate all of you joining us. I just want to put before, since it was described as a win-win deal, where the wins are seen in this India-EU trade deal for India. The win, of course, for both is a direct entry into a $2 trillion industrial market and a preferential access for Indian engineering goods. So that's good news for engineering. Gems and jewelry get 100% duty-free access. Therefore, it's a $79 billion premium market. Leather and footwear, tariffs have been slashed from 17% to 0%. And textiles and apparel, the win, immediate zero duty on 100% tariff lines and value. Do you believe, Mr. Puri, that this is win-win? I've listed where India could benefit, but there are those who are arguing that Europe could actually benefit far more than India would. We get cheap wine, cheap BMW, but that helps the top sliver of society. Will this actually be a boost to the Indian economy?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. Yes, I do believe that there is a win-win. All negotiations have certain amounts of give and takes, and if you think that there won't be a win for the European Union, that won't have happened. Let me say something to you. Trade is the platform on which this deal has been done. But in my understanding, the most important outcome of this will be giving an indication to European businesses, European corporate houses, the second biggest economy in the world, by far even bigger than China, that India is a place where they can do certainty, they can invest here. This is a country where trade possibilities are possible. You can do your entire supply chains can be fairly certain, etc. And so therefore, what it really does for us is it boosts this entire idea of investment from Europe into India in our quest to become Viksit Bharat, a $10 trillion economy by 2047, etc. This is the most important thing. And this is what I believe this trade deal brings to the surface. Trade will go up, but naturally, we have leveled the tariffs, the preferences which least developed countries like Bangladesh had got. That's fine, that's good. Some entree for highly skilled professionals to go and work there. But the signaling for Europeans to invest in India, that in my opinion is the most important. Therefore, win with a big W for India. Of course, the European Union also gains in areas which are of interest to them, quite apart from geopolitics, multi-alignment, and so on and so forth.
I'll come to the geopolitics, Mr. Puri, in a moment. Just to again tell our viewers, the EU market accounts for about 17%, 17% of India's total exports. And the EU's exports to India constitute 9% of its total overseas shipments. Now, Velina Tchakarova, this will have to go through the EU for ratification. We've seen with the Mercosur deal that EU has struck with South America that there are certain tangles. Do you believe this deal will go through smoothly, that by the end of this year, we will have a full-blown deal? Announcement made today, but as I said, devil can lie in the details. Will we have a full-blown trade deal with the EU come the end of the year?
Thank you very much for the invitation, and let us congratulate to this amazing achievement, which I agree with my Indian counterpart is win-win, actually win-win deal for both sides, for the European Union and India. And actually, contrary to the Mercosur deal, where some of the issues, in fact, led to disagreements in some of the countries, which again then put on hold the ratification. I do not see these hurdles in the case of the deal between the European Union and India. In fact, I think that we will see the ratification by all 27 member states by the end of the year, because this is a completely different situation. First and foremost, this is a completely different scale of a trade partner. India is en route to becoming world economic power number 3. It's very, very important for the European common market, and also because some sensitive issues were excluded from the deal right from the beginning. And here the key word, of course, agriculture, and some other issues that will be tackled in the months and the years to come. So all in all, I think there won't be any hurdles for the ratification process.
Sabyasachi Saha, you've heard two of our guests saying it's win-win. Is your view this is win-win, or should we be a little bit more cautious before celebrating at this moment?
Thank you, Rajdeep, for having me here today. And I have been following throughout the day the developments and the amount of information that has been put out. Clearly, these are extraordinary times, and India's ability to get into an agreement with a market of EU size is commendable. We have already seen the sectors that have been covered, but beyond the fine print, we are looking forward to the market access. But beyond that, if we are looking at the services trade that India has with EU, the possibilities of attracting investment from EU, the technology cooperation in other areas, I think this is the right time, because these are difficult times as well, but this is also the right time for India to get into such, it is commendable, as I've just mentioned, because it is not easy. It was a 20-year duration, but definitely EU finds India to be a reliable partner. India's growth story seems to be convincing, and this is the outcome that we have arrived at a deal today.
I heard the word just now from Mr. Saha, extraordinary times, Mr. Puri, and that's where the geopolitics comes in. We've seen in the last year in particular how Donald Trump in particular has weaponized tariffs, used tariffs to put pressure on India, to put pressure on other countries, including that extraordinary attack that he made on his European allies over Greenland. How much of what Donald Trump has done has pushed, you believe, EU and India, and indeed several other countries to, in a way, diversify their risk, look for other partners, and thereby will this be a counter in any way to what we had hoped would actually have happened at the start of the year, an India-US deal? So is this a substitute for that? Does this put additional pressure on the US to come to the negotiating table once again with India?
Rajdeep, I am not sure it puts any pressure on the United States, given the fact that it's President Trump who calls the shots there. But we never asked him to unleash this particular thing. And trade and flag are two sides of the same coin. So, there is an element of a game. What I find particularly interesting is that the transatlantic divergences, the disturbances which have been caused, now have asked the EU to look at other partners. They were already looking at China, which was a big deal as far as they were concerned, but they now believe that India and Mercosur are also good and important partners. I'm particularly interested in India, and they look at us as good partners for them, not substitutes, but as good partners to hedge their bets in various ways. Similarly, as far as we are concerned, the EU was India's largest trading partner, the largest investor in this country, the geography with which we have the greatest comfort in dealing with them, and so on and so forth. We were interested, again, backing out, making maximalist positions, and so on and so forth. Perhaps the Trumpian push allowed this to go forward. Look, we didn't ask for it, but that's the way it's happened. And this is good for us. It builds our strategic autonomy. And in a sense, the Europeans also do multi-alignment. Perhaps not bad for the world, because multipolarity certainly is something of importance to a country like India, which is going up the global value chain, if I may say so.
Velina, do you agree with that this is the EU's counter in a way to Donald Trump also? Because we've heard people close to Donald Trump say today that the EU is compromising its fight against Russia. It wants to buy cheap oil from India. The United States doesn't seem to be very happy with this deal at the moment.
Well, obviously, Trump and the United States, this administration will not be happy with this deal, because it is counterproductive to the whole tariff strategy that this Trump administration has imposed on both allies and competitors. And basically, with this deal, the European Union and India are showing a third way out of this bifurcation and out of this binary choice between US-centered and China-centered supply chains and centers of productivity and manufacturing and trade. And this is exactly what actually the point is. First and foremost, the largest democracies are coming together. They are going for free trade liberalization. They're opening up to each other, creating 2 billion people common market. On the one hand, the European Union is boosting and is participating in this immense growth that's destined to happen when it comes to India, but at the same time, still the common market, this is the largest actually common market in the world that the European Union has to offer. And there is a major opportunity when it comes to foreign investments. Right now, 140 billion. This is certainly going to increase when it comes to European investments. And yes, with this deal, both both actors are actually going for optionality. This is exactly the right moment for that. So Trump was certainly a factor, but it was not at the core of the decision to speed up the process, because first and foremost, the negotiations were relaunched in 2022. And we know for a fact what happened in 2022 when the European Union, found out that certain vulnerabilities were actually instrumentalized as a geopolitical weapon. And yes, of course, the Trump factor accelerated the process, and it was in that sense also win-win for both sides to happen right now.
Will this involve, Velina, though, also technology transfer? Because Europe holds some of its intellectual property rights very close to its chest. Do you believe that they will be willing to transfer technologies to India as well?
Yes, I actually, not now, but there is already a technology council. So we have actually a whole plethora of different platforms which are simultaneously happening right now when it comes to the relations between the European Union and India. And within the technological, domain, there are already ongoing conversations and negotiations. Same goes for security and defense, by the way. I mean, there will be also some transfer and some arms deals, which is also good for both sides when it comes to optionality, when it comes to geopolitical realignment, and when it comes to creating actually a hedge against binary choices in an increased bifurcation of the global system, something that's not really working for both actors right now.
Very interestingly, Sabyasachi, this is the 8th free trade deal India has signed now in the Modi government over the last few years. Is this showing a complete shift in policy? From protectionism, we are now lowering tariffs and we are reaching out to countries. That this is actually, in a way, a sweet spot that we are trying to find to increase our trade basket and hedge from any American-centric trade basket.
Yeah, as you have rightly pointed out, this is a time to diversify, both in terms of exports as well as imports. And as you have rightly mentioned, that this comes at the back of enhanced confidence that India has gained through signing multiple free trade agreements in the recent past, including with developed countries, where we have kind of covered sectors that we were not negotiating earlier. So that brings in regulatory predictability, and also predictability in terms of, because this is part of foreign policy as well. So it brings in a lot of predictability in foreign relations, and that is where India and Europe would remain a very long-term partner. And this is surely to bring gains to both partners.
Final word, Mr. Puri. Where does this, in your view, therefore, while opening up India's market, what implications does this have for India's Make in India initiative? Will this actually have the kind, this word mother of all deals, sometimes we get caught in the hype. Should we dial down a bit on the hype?
No, Rajdeep, let me say this. It's, of course, the biggest trade deal that India has done. And that's the way one should understand it. Now, I want to make one little point to you. This is not a substitute for doing a deal with the Americans. That's a different matter. But does it allow you a certain amount of hedging for India? Yes. It also allows the same thing in a sense for the European Union, perhaps at a lesser level in that sense of the term. So, people are building what you may say elements of the strategic autonomy, and that's par for the course. Now, coming to your main question about investments in India. Look, I believe that the key for India is not trade, but investments in India, growing the Indian economy to whatever $10 trillion by 2047. Can we do it by ourselves? Difficult. Do we need foreign investment? Absolutely. Which is the place in the world from where we get it with technology and a sense of comfort. We can get some from the Middle East too. But Europe is the place where traditionally we've got it. The deal with the UK was useful, FTA was useful, but EU really is the mother of them all. And getting them and giving European businesses the feeling that there is certainty in terms of the rules which play there. And remember, people make investments not just because you have a great market and you have a big market. They make investments when supply chains can be easy, when things can move forward, when trade is also open. And this is something very important, which is why I believe this trade deal gives the right signals. We, of course, now have to build upon it along with an investment agreement. And remember, let me say one word of caution. There is this entire business of CBAM, the carbon border adjustment. And will we be able to overcome that? Will it not? Well, at least at the moment, political signals have been given that let's try and find some ways forward. The European Union, which otherwise said, look, we are the rule givers, they also said, look, there's some advantage to us at this time. Perhaps Donald Trump is the reason for it. Let's deal with another large economy. Let's hedge our bets also. We also looked at it like this. So that's where the elements of win-win. But for me, I think the greatest importance of all of this is that perhaps it's a segue to much larger financial and technological investments by Europeans into India, in the belief that there's certainty for India being a much less protectionist economy.
Let's leave it there. I think wonderful to get some fine voices on this. The general impression is that there is a lot to be gained from this deal, but also certain caveats in place, particularly the ease and speed of doing business within India, which will really have to propel us forward. Thank you all to my guests for joining us. Now, earlier this week, I was in Davos, and among the people I spoke to was perhaps one of the world's leading authorities on trade policies, Professor Ishwar Prasad from Cornell University. I asked him about the need in this Trumpian era to diversify our trading partners. Listen in to what he had to say. What we are seeing around us is extreme disorder, the possibility now of a Europe-US trade war spiraling out of control, tariffs across the world. Do you believe, therefore, that 2026 will see even more chaos and disorder, and therefore making any predictions of the future is becoming extremely difficult?
So the main thesis of my book is that instability is becoming the norm rather than just a cycle that we are going through and where we go back to stability. In fact, when I started working on the book, I had a different thesis in mind. I had this vision that we were starting from a unipolar world when the Soviet Union fell apart. The US became the dominant power in every dimension in the 1990s. We are moving to a world where economic power is at least more evenly distributed. And for an economist, competition is good because it generates efficiency, stability, balance. But as I thought about all the forces that should take us back towards this new equilibrium, I started realizing that in fact they might create instability rather than stability. One of the forces, for instance, is globalization, and there's been a lot of discussion at Davos about what the future of globalization is. Now, trade is something that brings a lot of benefits, so I don't think we're going to see trade between countries cease. But what is happening is that trade is fragmenting along geopolitical lines. In other words, countries that are seen as geopolitical allies trade more with each other, have more financial ties. So that does not mean that trade or finance are backing off. But one very important implication is that globalization used to be seen as a positive-sum game that could offset to some extent the zero-sum game of geopolitics, where one country's influence comes at the expense of another. Now that balancing force is gone, and even if we think about, as you mentioned, the geopolitical fragmentation, even what we used to think of as a traditional alliances, the West, the emerging market countries, and those aligned with China and Russia, for instance, even those are splintering right now. So the world order is at some level splintering before our very eyes.
And the more Donald Trump weaponizes tariffs, does it therefore become more difficult in a way for countries even like India? Or is there an opportunity to look beyond the United States, as India is now doing. There's talk of a mother of all trade deals coming up with the EU in a week or so. India struck bilateral trade deals. Do you therefore see more and more countries de-risking themselves? That's the other buzzword at the moment, de-risking, by not focusing exclusively on the United States. Tariffs, weaponization could actually open up opportunities, or will it make the world order even more chaotic?
At one level, this is an opportunity for all countries, but there is another very important element that enters into the discussions right now. On the one side, we have the largest economy in the world putting up tariff barriers. On the other hand, we have the second largest economy in the world, China, right now, which has a huge amount of excess capacity because their growth model in the last few years has generated a lot of output, but domestic demand is not keeping up. So China last year registered a trade surplus of about $1.2 trillion. Right. This is a good trade surplus. So countries in the middle are getting squeezed from both sides, and therefore they're looking for alternatives. So you're right that the European Union would very much like to have a trade deal with India because they see themselves as being beset by risks from both sides. Now the question is whether this is going to be a durable set of arrangements that other countries come to. My sense is that countries are going to try to de-risk by diversifying. You can diversify both in terms of the sources of imports, raw materials, processed imports and so on, but also in terms of exports. So we're going to, I think, see diversification become the theme over the next few years.
And you can catch more of that interview on Business Today. Let's though turn to the big story here, the other big story, the University Grant Commission's new rules for equity on the campuses to ensure that Dalits, Adivasis and OBCs, if they feel discrimination, can protest, has led now to a counter-protest and political ripples. Remember, the new rules say that which upper castes are objecting and has put even the ruling BJP in a spot is that the fact is that there is a fear of a caste divide on the campus. Take a look at why this issue could become the next political time bomb.
Once again in the spotlight, how caste fault line continued to be an influential force in India, shaping its cultural hierarchy, political dynamics and social unrest. Students and upper caste groups are protesting the University Grants Commission's new rules on discrimination, calling them biased and dangerous. The regulations seek to overhaul how Indian universities identify, investigate, and penalize caste-based bias. The draft defines discrimination broadly, covering explicit acts, implicit bias, structural disadvantage, and harm to dignity. It mandates that every university set up equal opportunity centers and equity panels, complaints committees with powers to investigate and recommend action, equity squads to monitor vulnerable campus spaces, equity ambassadors in hostels and departments, and a 24-hour helpline that can directly connect complainants with the police. While the stated objective is greater inclusion and safety, the framework has triggered sharp resistance from upper caste groups. Protesters argue the rules tilt the system against them. They point to the absence of mandatory general category representation on decision-making panels, the lack of penalties for false or malicious complaints, vague terms such as implicit discrimination, and what they describe as a reversal of the burden of proof.
जो SC, ST, OBC ये वर्ग हैं, ये सब शोषित उसमें दिखाए गए हैं कि इनका शोषण हो रहा है। विद्या के मंदिर में विद्या के आधार पे छात्रों को बांटने का काम कर रहे हैं।
हमारी मांग है इस काले कानून को तुरंत वापस लिया जाए। हमारी मांग ये नहीं है कि इसमें संशोधन किया जाए।
Amid the protest, Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan has sought to reassure critics.
किसी को उत्पीड़न होने नहीं दिया जाए, कोई भेदभाव नहीं होगा। जो व्यवस्था हुई है भारत की, कुछ भी व्यवस्था हो संविधान की परिधि के अंदर होगा, और ये जो विषय आई है ये तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट की निगरानी में व्यवस्था है।
The controversy has now reached the Supreme Court. The plea argues that the draft rules deny grievance redressal and institutional protection to persons belonging to non-SC, ST and OBC categories. The issue is a political hot potato, with most political parties trying to stay away from the controversy, with a few speaking out.
The UGC, this particular vertical of caste against caste, this is the creation of this BJP government. They have been always pitching one caste against another caste, one religion against another religion. So this is an internal matter. Nevertheless, let all these issues be discussed.
As protests continue on the streets and the legal challenge unfolds in court, the larger question remains unresolved. Can the UGC's push for equity strike a balance between protection and fairness? Or will it deepen social fault lines and politically backfire? Bureau Report, India Today.
Let's raise some big questions. The UGC's equity regulations, are they timely? Are checks needed against false complaints made on the grounds of caste discrimination? Can these equity panels be made more representative, or are we dividing our campuses once again on caste lines? Joining me now, Professor Sukhdev Thorat is former chairman of the UGC. Professor Thorat, your first reactions to the intense protests that have begun, particularly among upper caste students and groups who are saying that these new equity rules could be misused because of broad definitions of discrimination, potentially fueling campus conflict involving OBCs, SCs and STs versus upper caste. How do you see it? Will this lead to a divide on caste lines on the campus?
No, I don't think. Thank you very much, Sardesai, for bringing me here on this particular issue. I don't think it will lead to divide. One has to understand that the 2012 regulations have been in practice for the last 12 years. The Untouchability Offence Act of 1955, which was renamed as Protection of Civil Rights Act, which has a provision against punishment for untouchability and caste discrimination even in the education institutions. Similarly, the Prevention of Atrocity Act of 1989, which has a provision of discrimination in admission. This has not led to the divide and the...
Sir, but now OBCs, if I may just interrupt, because the difference between 2012, the updated version includes OBCs, and many worry because the OBCs are such a large block that therefore this could lead to false complaints.
No, see, listen, the 2026 regulation has watered down the 2012 regulation. As a matter of fact, it's much more softer than what is contained in 2012. 2012 regulation has removed the forms of discrimination. As a matter of fact, the definition of discrimination remains same. It is the United Nations discrimination definition. So definition of discrimination remains same. They have even removed the forms of discrimination, and they have left it to the equity committee in the university to decide to list the discrimination. Now, coming to the OBC issue, listen, the OBC did not have a reservation in the central education institution and IITs and central university. It was done in 2011-12. And now, after they got the reservation in the educational institution, they began to feel the discrimination on a much smaller scale, perhaps with a lesser intensity than the scheduled caste. But they began to feel discrimination, calling them as a quota student, and reservation is not being filled. In fact, the reservation of the scheduled caste in faculty and student is much less than that of scheduled caste. It's not in proportion to the population. So there is a justification that if the OBC face discrimination, there is a necessity to have a legal safeguard to them against the possibility.
But sir, if I may, the legal safeguards is one thing. You mentioned equity committees, that colleges will have to have equity committees to look at these cases of discrimination. Now, as per the rules, the equity committees must include members from SC, ST, OBCs, women categories. But there is no mandate for general category representation. So that again leads to fears that these could be one-sided, that certain groups could lose out. Are these all irrational fears in your view? Are the students being misled by politics?
No, I think the regulation doesn't mention that the entire committee will be consist of SC, ST and OBC. In fact, that is one of the limitations which is pointed out by the...
No, but it does not specifically mention general category, sir.
No, it's not mentioned, but there will be general. You look at the provision that they mention that there will be generally one each person from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and OBC, which means rest of them will be general. So I don't think that fear is there.
But is there a need for such a regulatory, do you believe that there is a need for regulation? Because when I look at numbers, 378 complaints in 23-24 across thousands of institutions in such a large country. Do you believe that you need this regulatory overhaul of these equity committees? Do you believe the problem is serious enough of discrimination to need these committees?
Well, that's a very important question, Sardesai, that you have raised. You know, we have to go back in the history a little bit at the time of framing of this 2012 regulation. You know, I was the chairman of the UGC, and 2008, there were two suicides in All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and the principal secretary of the Ministry of Family Planning and Health approached me to chair a committee to inquire into the reason as to why there are suicide in the All India Institute of Medical Science. Reluctantly, I accepted that, but then I did a survey. There was no support, but nevertheless, I was able to generate the data. And it was a first somewhat systematic report which brings out the discrimination faced by the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe from the high caste student, from the high caste teacher, and from the high caste administrator. And this was given in percentage terms and even in qualitative terms. So discrimination was there. We identified the spare in teaching, in evaluation, in laboratories, in cultural life, in hostel, in separate mess. So that led to the exposure of the fact that the education institutions are not immune to discrimination. Right. And then
so you're saying it's necessary. So you're saying it's much needed, it's necessary. Allow it to actually function. And if there are any irregularities, they can always be corrected later. Am I correct?
No, irregularity in which? In regulations?
If these equity committees do not perform according to their specified mandate, then you can relook at it. But to protest even before they come into being, you believe is a flawed way of looking at it. Am I correct?
No, I will answer.
Do you support it? Do you support equity committees or not?
Yeah, I do support equity committee, but let's just have a background to this, please, Sardesai. That after the regulation in 2012, there were suicide by Vemula, there were suicide by Payal Tagdi, and then there was suicide by Solanki in IIT Mumbai. As a result, these two mothers went to the Supreme Court, and the case was taken by Disha Wadekar. And they asked that remove certain inadequacy in regulation 2012 and enforce it properly. And Supreme Court then advised, they called the UGC and they said that please give us information how you are enforcing.
Right.
And the UGC then issued out a letter to the all education institutions to mention as to how many of them had set up the Equal Opportunity Office and how many complaints they got about discrimination. Half of the education institutions did not set up the Equal Opportunity Office. The complaints were less, not because that there is no discrimination. The complaints were received, they were passed on to the counselor. No action was taken.
Right.
So it is the less effective implementation of 2012 which led to the intervention by the Supreme Court.
I take your point, and I think it's important to have that background in place. I hope that that this issue, therefore, is seen in its wider context of a society where there is embedded caste discrimination at various levels, and therefore it's important to have, many believe, these committees in place and make them as transparent and effective as possible. Professor Thorat, for now, I appreciate you joining us. We will carry forward this debate, of course, in the days to come. Thank you very much, Professor Thorat, for joining me. Now, tennis icon Vijay Amritraj has been named this year in the prestigious Padma Bhushan for a Padma Bhushan in the sports category, recognizing a lifetime of trailblazing excellence. Remember, Amritraj, born in Chennai, emerged in the 1970s to take Indian tennis onto the global stage, winning 16 ATP singles titles, twice reaching the quarterfinals of Wimbledon, and twice taking India to the Davis Cup finals, including an iconic 1974 campaign. Amritraj is the only sportsperson this year to receive the Padma Bhushan. Joining me now is the one and only Vijay Amritraj. Appreciate Vijay joining us on the show. Congratulations to the Padma Bhushan. What did it feel when you heard you'd got a Padma Bhushan? What, 42 years after you got a Padma Shri? You're now Padma Bhushan, Vijay Amritraj. Congrats.
Yes, I tell you, when I first got the news and immediately told my wife at dinner time, we both were in tears, to be honest, because it is kind of the last quarter of my life, which is what it looks like. And I feel so blessed and honored to receive this from the government of India. And being Indian and constantly traveling the world and constantly wearing the flag on my sleeve, and the anthem was sung wherever I played, it just made me feel even more right about being Indian.
You know what you did, Vijay, is incredible. That in a country which probably doesn't look beyond cricket superstars, you were the original global superstar in sports. The ABC of tennis, 1970s, Amritraj Borg Corners. Is this in a way a recognition not just of what you've achieved, Vijay, on the tennis court, but being an ambassador of the soft power of Indian sport through tennis?
I think so, Rajdeep. To be honest, I just feel that this is a celebration of my life's journey. And for me, it has always been how Indians traveled from this part of the world in the late 60s, early 70s to different parts of the world to now be a diaspora of some 35 million Indians worldwide who truly carry the Indian flag in their heart. And I do believe that playing at that time in the 70s and 80s, every Indian, wherever it was, came out to watch me play. I knew I had to just deliver 70% of my tennis. They would take me the other 30% of the way. So it just makes me feel good, because I really do believe that the government of India giving this award to me at this time in my career, it really is a celebration of everyone's life who moved to play somewhere else.
In that long career, is there a moment that stands out which you think embodies what Vijay Amritraj meant to Indian tennis?
Frankly, there were only two reasons besides my health, of course, which is why I got into tennis. But the two reasons for me to play the sport, and fortunately at a very, very high level, was the fact that I would able to represent India if I was good enough. And I managed to do that for 20 years. And the fact that when I played Davis Cup, it was not me, it was India. It was Indian playing Davis Cup. And two was Wimbledon. And those were the two events where I always never played as myself, I played as an Indian. And I think that's the feeling that I kind of live with my whole life. The rest of it was a professional tour. Yes, I made a good living from it. Yes, I visited places I never thought I would go to. I've met people I never thought I would meet. But truly speaking, it was Davis Cup for India and Wimbledon for India.
And the boy from Chennai who went on to 2 Wimbledon quarterfinals in the Open era, 2 Davis Cup finals. Any regrets? Anything at the end of a wonderful career that you felt on and off the court that you regret today?
Good question. I think if I had to do it all over again, I would do it exactly the same way. My parents played such an incredible role in making me what I am. The good in me came from them. The bad in me I picked up along the way. I do believe that I've been blessed with a very, very lovely partner in life. My wife of 43 years, Shamala, my 2 sons who have been a delight. And more than anything else, I think people say, "Oh, are you upset that you never won Wimbledon?" And I said, that's truly looking at the cup half empty. I look at the cup half full, and I hope I have served India well and represented the country well overseas.
But you know, Vijay, you certainly did the country proud, but it's ironical that in recent times we struggled in tennis, both Davis Cup and in the individual sport. What is it? Why has tennis not achieved, let's say, what badminton has managed to achieve, where we've got so many badminton players at the very top?
Very good question. I think the biggest problem on a regular basis with sport in India, and individual sports in particular, is the fact that you have to honestly give your life to it at a very young age. And is that a risk worth taking? Is it a good startup business to actually invest money in? And I think that's where we falter a little bit, because the conservative nature of our culture and the attitude that we have. Let's go to education, get a degree, get a job, get married, you're very secure. I think that's the play. That's the playbook. But I think a lot has changed. Today, nobody's going to have asked Dhoni or Tendulkar, what do you do for a living? I used to all, when I was playing, they used to say, yes, you play tennis, what do you do for a living? And so I think that kind of a risk factor is hard to accept in India, but now it's starting to change.
But what I always liked about you, Vijay, is that you were someone who never envied the cricketers and the riches they got, partly because you yourself were making a damn good living playing the ATP tour. But it almost seems as if Amritraj just loved any sportsman, any sport. It wasn't tennis versus cricket, which I think was refreshing.
It certainly wasn't. It certainly wasn't tennis versus cricket. It is honestly putting India on the map, on the sporting map worldwide. Tennis is the second most global sport in the world after FIFA, soccer. And so I feel like wherever I played in the world, in the smallest of towns, in the biggest of cities, it was just my dream to see that flag flying and anthem being sung. Even last 2 years ago, when I was inducted in the Hall of Fame, I specifically requested that the anthem needs to be played. I specifically requested for our flag to be flown. And that's the only time they did it.
You know, I'm speaking to you, Vijay, when you're in Chennai at the moment. You also spend a lot of time in Los Angeles. Where are you more comfortable, I wonder? Where does Vijay Amritraj feel comfortable? Still the Chennai boy who made it good? Or the big tennis star who, dare I say, once dated some of the most famous Hollywood models and actors?
Fortunately or unfortunately, you followed my career very carefully. So
I did.
I think
Farah
you know everything and then some about me, Rajdeep. But no, thank you.
And
for me,
Odyssey and Star Trek?
It has never left. I will always be Indian. I will always be from the city of Chennai. I will always be something that is inherent in me. All these years that I've lived overseas, I proudly still carry my Indian passport. It doesn't matter where I live, what I do, wherever I go. I'm first and foremost, I will always be Indian.
You know, I'm showing the pictures from the James Bond films that you did, Vijay, which again became iconic. But is there a message that you have to this younger generation who may aspire to play tennis or make a mark for themselves in Indian sport? What would your message, Vijay, be for them?
My message to them, honestly, for any sport, would be you have to work very hard at a sport to excel for the simple reason that it will help you on a life's journey. There is nothing that comes second to sport at the highest level. I think what it teaches me, it taught me so much about myself. It has been my greatest education. And I do believe that, especially in an individual sport, I do believe that once they do that, it'll be a passion in their lives forever. And truly, as we look back and we look forward and we look at the 2036 where we're going after the Olympic Games, I think there's a great opportunity here to put all your eggs in this basket, go after sports, and make sure that we can put India truly on the map by the time we get the Olympics.
You know, in a way, as we leave you, Indian sport probably in a better place in 2025 than when you started off in the late 1960s.
Oh, no question about it. Absolutely. India is in a great spot right now. And look at the world where we are. Truly speaking, this is the place to be. This is the growth. The domestic economy is flying. And I do believe that people are running around in this country having their holidays. It's starting to get expensive. So I'm just saying that, yes, sport, it's time for us to grab a hold of sport. If we can do it in other industries, whether it's textiles, in software, and so many other startups, the largest number of startups from India, why can't we do it also in sport to match what they've done? If there are 28 Indian CEOs, the top 100 Fortune companies, you know, we should be up there in the top 100 as well.
You know, my son, who was a tennis player, told me, Vijay, tell Mr. Amritraj that he hasn't seen a better commentator of a tennis game than him, that when you were commentating a Federer versus Nadal final, you just took the sport to another level. He enjoyed listening to you, as did many of us. You enjoy the commentary still?
Thank you. Yes, it's the love for the game that comes out, I think. And I honestly believe that the family of four are getting ready to watch. Two may like the sport, two might not. What I want to do, I want to keep the two people who love the sport in it, and I want the two people who do not love the sport to come watch it. So I do believe that it'll be very much a part of their lives if they hear me speak on television for the sport.
You know, just listening to you, Vijay, it seems that time has rolled by. I love that infectious smile. I just want to say you were part of a generation. I grew up in 1970s. Vijay Amritraj on the tennis court, Sunil Gavaskar on the cricket field, Prakash Padukone on the badminton court. All three of you have done your sport in the country very proud. You're truly deserving of the Padma Bhushan. Thank you so much, Vijay Amritraj, for all that you've done for Indian tennis and sport.
Rajdeep, thank you so much. Really enjoyed talking to you.
Great to have you. Okay, I'm going to leave you, with something that's created a bit of a stir. One of our headlines, renowned singer Arijit Singh announces that he's not going to take any new playback assignments on his Instagram account. Having established himself as the leading voice in the Indian music industry, Singh has thanked his listeners for their support. We leave you with these visuals of the singer. We hope he changes his mind, because music is eternal. Thanks for watching. You stay well, stay safe. Good night, Shubhratri. That was the news without the noise.